Hello everybody and welcome to this tutorial about the registration user interface version 2.3.1. In this tutorial we're going to go over how to use the RUI, how to save out your registration data, and to just show you the functionality of the interface. The RUI is a web deployed tool. That means you can access it from anywhere as long as you have an internet connection and a web browser. What I'm showing you here is the standalone version of the RUI. This is opposed to the version that is embedded in the ingest portal. All right, so as you go to the website, you are being greeted with this so-called modal, so this little window that you have to go through before you can get to the RUI proper. So I'm going to start by typing in my first name and then type in my last name. Then we're going to choose the donor sex for which we want to register a tissue block. Let's just go with the male, and then we can go with a organ. Let's just do the lungs. It's a very beautiful registration, a very beautiful reference organ. Here we go. So now this is the registration user interface. On the left we have the anatomical structures pane, then we have the 3D pane in the middle, and we have the manipulation pane on the right. So let's first talk about the anatomical structures pane. You can see that we have all the anatomical structures that are present in this 3D model listed here, as they are. And then you can go ahead and turn some of these on and off. You may not always want to see the entire registration. You may not always want to see the entire reference organ. So in order to turn some of these off, you can hover over this drop icon here, and then you see the slider appear. And then to make it disappear entirely, you can go to this eye icon and click it, and then it'll disappear. You can actually see that right here, so keep your eyes here for a second. I'm going to turn it back on, and there it is. It's a very small structure, so it's kind of hard to see. Another thing that you can do here is with the slider, if I move the slider up, you can increase the opacity. So if you look at the bronchus here, as I move the slider around, you see that the opacity of the bronchus changes. At 100%, it is completely opaque. Now we start with a 20% opacity by default, just to make sure everything is somewhat visible. And if you want to reset that to the default, you just click this little circular arrow button. This is a theme throughout the entire RUI, these little circular arrow buttons. When you click them, whatever value you manipulated can be reset to the default value. All right. Another thing that we have here are the common extraction sites, and to demonstrate that, I'm going to go over to the kidney. So this is the left kidney that just loaded, and here we have one common extraction site, and it's the bisection line. So these common extraction sites are visual landmarks that should make it easier for you to make your registration or to orient yourself where you are with regards to the organ. So if I hover over the drop icon here, you can see they're turned off by default. You can turn that on, and then you can see the bisection line appears here in green. Let me actually bring that up a whole bunch. Here we go. So now it's very prominent here in the middle. All right. Another thing that you can do here, and that depends on your browser history, really on your cache, is you can show previously registered blocks. So these are blocks that you registered before using the RUI. For that, it goes into your local storage. So depending on which machine you're on, this is always going to be different. Okay, so this is not pulling from the ingest portal or from the HubMap data portal. This is just pulling from your browser. I'm going to turn that off. For now, it will be displayed in blue here, but I'm going to turn this off for now. All right, now let's talk about the 3D manipulation pane. This is where it gets interesting. We see those 4 radio buttons up here, and these correspond to camera positions that we can have around the organ. So currently we are in the anterior position, so we are basically standing in front of the reference body looking at the kidney. This is also visualized with this little mannequin here on the right side. So now if I switch to the right position, I'm going to go to the right side of the body. You can see how this little mannequin changed and also the kidney changed. And so by using these radio buttons, I can move my camera around the kidney in 90-degree increments. Here we go. All right, so that is of course all good, but sometimes we want to have a camera position that is unique. like we want to be able to influence the camera position in a less restricted way. And to do that, we can use this toggle switch here to go to the 3D preview mode. So if we click that, all right, so now I'm in the 3D preview mode. And what this allows me to do is to move my camera around the organ just in a less restricted way. So you can also see my hand here with my mouse. So now if you press and hold the left mouse button, you can rotate the camera around. You can also see that the mannequin here is updating depending on which side of the body we are looking at. Now if you press and hold your right mouse button, you can pan the camera, so you can just move it sideways and up. And if you use your mouse scroll wheel here in the middle, you can zoom in and out. All right, now that we learned how to rotate, pan and zoom the camera, let's go back into registration mode real quick and let's talk about how to actually move the tissue block. So this is a representation of the tissue block that we are trying to register. Most of the time you will probably want to resize it. By default, it has a width, height and depth of 10 millimeters or 1 centimeter. So let's just resize that maybe to 12 millimeters by 7 millimeters by 3 millimeters. Here we go. And now, as you can see, if I press and hold my left mouse button, I can move the tissue block. Okay. So I'm going to move that into the kidney here. All right. And now, let's say I want to align it with the bisection line. The best way to do that is to go back into the 3D preview mode and then move my camera into position, like zooming in, rotating here so that I'm nicely aligned with the bisection line. All right, so now the goal is to align the tissue block with this bisection line. So we have to rotate the block. To do that, we can use these rotation sliders over here in the manipulation pane. So first I rotate around Y, which is the up axis, and then I would have to rotate around the X axis. All right. And now I would like to move the tissue block closer to here. Of course, I cannot use my mouse for this because my mouse currently controls the camera. So we can now use our keyboard to move the tissue block closer. So for this, we are using these 6 keys, W, A, S, D, Q, and E. If I press W, the tissue block goes up by 0.5 millimeters every time. If I press S, it goes down. And then if I press, let me rotate the camera here. If I press A, we move this way. If I press D, I move this way. Finally, if I press Q, I'm going to go away from the bisection line. If I press E, I'm going to go toward the bisection line. So let's actually use that. I'm just going to keep pressing E, maybe a little bit of S to align somewhere around here. So I'm basically, it's kind of like docking a spaceship. All right. So now if I go over to the other side of the bisection line, I can see it start poking through. Let's bring it through a little more. Let's try to refine our alignment here. There we go. That looks pretty good. Now let's try to get it back out. All right. So now we are pretty neatly, very snugly aligned here with the bisection line, and I can move it around as needed, just using my keys. Beautiful. All right, so now we have made our alignment. Let's talk a little bit more about what else we have over here on the manipulation pane. By the way, the current position, like the 3D coordinates of your tissue block, are always displayed here. Okay, this is in millimeters from the origin of the scene, which is the back bottom left corner of the organ, although that should not be too relevant for your registration. If you want to reset your position, by the way, you can just click the circular arrow button. Same goes for the tissue block dimensions and the rotation. The slices, this is just metadata that we're collecting. You can put in the thickness in micrometers and the number of slices. Now, the rotation, we already talked about that. This is the rotation around the axes, so the Y, X, and Z axes, where X is up, Y is up, X is sideways, so left to right, and Z is posterior to anterior. All Alright, now let's talk about these anatomical structure tags. So you can see as I moved the tissue block into the kidney, we get all of these tags, these are called pills, all of these anatomical structure tags. Let's go into registration mode real quick, and I'm gonna reset my position. Now you see that this suddenly is empty, because currently we are not colliding with any structure. So we used collision detection, which is a feature in many 3D engines, which allow you as a user to detect collisions between two 3D objects. We see that all the time in Hollywood movies or in video games. So typically, after two objects collide in a video game or in a movie, you have like an animation or an explosion. Here we have something very innocent happening. We just get an anatomical structure tag. So as I move my tissue block, watch this over here, as I move my tissue block into the kidney, you see that we suddenly have these anatomical structure tags appear and disappear. So as I keep moving the tissue block, you will see that the structure tags change depending on where I am. This is because the collision detection kicks into gear. Now, the way we currently do collision detection is with bounding boxes. Bounding boxes are basically just cuboids around each individual structure. So that means that the collision detection is not 100% accurate. So if I put this back here, okay. Sometimes you get an anatomical structure tag that you don't want. And so in order to remove one, all you do is you click this little X here and then it's removed. Now if you want to add one that you don't see listed here, or you deleted one on accident, you can just click in here and then type a term. And it's important that it has to be one of the terms here in the anatomical structure list over here. So then say the kidney capsule, I click this checkbox, and then I click plus, and then it appears here with this purple color. All right, so we just made this registration. Let's say this looks good to us. Then we can go to review and download. So we click this button here. Okay, and now this gives us this registration review window where we see the data that we just generated. So we see the first and last name, the name of the reference organ. Then we see some geometric information about the tissue block, which of course corresponds to these numbers here for the position, dimensions, and rotation. And then here we see the anatomical structure tags, and it's really important that you spend time in making sure that these are actually the ones that you want. Then we have a timestamp, which is the date, and a unique alignment ID. And then we can click this download registration data button. Okay, see this prompt here. I'm just going to download that here to my desktop. All right, so we finished our registration. We are done with that part. Now let's briefly talk about how you can revisit an existing registration. So to do that, I'm gonna refresh my browser window here, which deletes everything that we just did. Then I have to type in my data into the modal again. And now, just for demonstration's sake, I'm gonna choose a different reference organ. Let's go with the lung again. All right, so now let's say I'm in here and I want to load the data that I just generated. Then you can go to this upload previous registration data button, click it, and then you can choose the data that we just saved here. And then you're gonna see that the entire scene resets, the correct reference organ is loaded, the correct sex is loaded, your tissue block is automatically resized, automatically repositioned, and automatically rotated. And we are just where we were before. So now if you wanted to edit that registration, you could do that and then just review and download again. Okay, let's briefly talk about the info section up here. If you click this little I button, you are presented with this info section. So some information on how to use the RUI, plus a link to a video tutorial, which we keep updated, an about section. And then you have a link to a standard operating procedure, which is a Word document that outlines the exact usage of what we also cover here in this video tutorial, and finally some acknowledgements. So in this video tutorial, we looked at the RUI or registration user interface. We talked about how to use the anatomical structures pane, the 3D pane, and the manipulation pane to perform a tissue registration for one of the supported reference organs. If you do have any questions, please reach out to MCIU and we will be happy to help you. Thank you so much for your time and talk to you soon.